everyone, it's time for us to go and take a look at the Samsung Galaxy A50 and see how this particular phone holds up in 2024. Now, the thing I will definitely tell you is that this is a fairly old phone now. This phone came out like 5 years ago, so it is a very, very older device that you'd probably expect. But I will say there's still a lot to love about this particular device too, and we will talk about that throughout this whole entire video. Now, if you want to pick up some phones, even some budget phones that I would recommend buying this year, links will be down in the description. You can get them from there and you can help support the channel at the same time. Now, starting off with the outside of the Samsung Galaxy A50, on the front of this particular device, we are actually getting a 6.4-inch Super AMOLED display. Now, I will be honest, for this device having this type of display back then is actually pretty crazy to me. Because when you are getting a device like this, you probably, would not expect this thing having to have like this decent of a display. And that's exactly what's going on. This is a very decent display for this type of device. And I do think that's a very cool thing going on for this particular phone. It's not a perfect device by any means. Like, this is definitely an older type of styling. But I will tell you, in a lot of ways, this is a phone that I would look at as kind of being the pillar for a lot of good budget phones, kind of going forward. You have to remember, this phone was like not that expensive. I think it was like less than $400 when it came out. You can buy these things for like probably $30, $40 now. They're not that expensive anymore. But with this display, it is very surprising to me. It's 1080p, 60 Hz, not the biggest, best display of all time. But again, it's like pretty surprising that Samsung made a display like this at that moment. Now, you are getting a USB Type-C port on the bottom of this thing. Now, you were getting either a micro USB port on this thing. You are getting the charging port on the bottom of this thing, which is fine, a headphone jack, and you are getting a micro SD card slot on this device too, which again is very nice to have. Having a micro SD card slot in and of itself is super crazy, and this is easily by far one of my most favorite things, again, going on for this particular device. I love being able to go through and just expanding my storage like immediately, and that is exactly what's going on for this particular device too. So this, once again, in and of itself, definitely gets a thumbs up for me. And again, like if I'm going through and buying some sort of a device, I definitely like this thing because it is giving me that type of capability right there, which again, gets a thumbs up for me. I love having this type of capability without a doubt. Now, on top of that, on the back side, you are basically getting this kind of like triple camera setup. We'll talk about that later on in this video. You're getting this plastic back, and this phone was primarily built out of plastic, which is probably what you'd expect. When you are getting this type of phone, it really is not the most expensive feeling phone of all time, and that's kind of what's going on here. So you're just going to have to kind of get that, just gonna have to get that to your head. That is just a cheaper feeling phone. But I will tell you in a lot of ways too, like that's kind of okay. This phone is not going for the most expensive premium phone of all time. It's going for like a cheaper type of budget phone that you can basically purchase. And I do think like when you think about it from that side, I think it's totally understandable. And I do think that in and of itself is a very nice thing going on for this particular device too. So that in and of itself, I would say gets a thumbs up for me just for this phone being as cheap as it was, and for it being kind of the forefront of a lot of the other A phones that have came out since then. And it's crazy because now when you look at the Samsung Galaxy A15, that device is actually giving you a OLED or AMOLED display, which is a much better display than the IPS TFT panels that we were getting before. So I think the changes that Samsung has made for the last couple generations of devices, I think is actually very impressive, and it definitely gets a thumbs up for me for sure. So in terms of that also gets a thumbs up for me without a doubt. Now, in terms of the camera side of things, this phone, as I mentioned before, is kind of giving you this like triple camera setup on the backside, a 25 megapixel wide, 8 megapixel ultra wide, then a 5 megapixel depth lens. And on the front side, you're getting this 25 megapixel wide angle lens. Now, I will tell you, this camera, as you probably would have expected, isn't really that great of a camera. It's a fairly like average type of sensor, if you could kind of even call it that. It's just really not that great, but that's just kind of what happens. Like when you're getting these types of older phones, of course they're not going to be that great. And of course you're going to run into different problems and issues and things like that. And this camera is pretty lackluster when it kind of comes down to it, even when it first came out. But you have to remember, these Samsung phones, they're not really going for like the best, most expensive cameras of all time. They're going for like cheaper type of budget phones. That's kind of what the main thing, Samsung is kind of going for these types of devices. And I will tell you that's primarily what Samsung was going for here as well, which is not really a bad thing. I think it's totally understandable. And I will tell you with the Samsung Galaxy A50, it's more or less like it's really not that great of a camera. Even in the stock camera app, it's not that great. But especially inside of those social media applications, it's also not going to be doing that great either. So keep that in mind. Again, it's not the biggest deal in the world, but it's just one of those minor things to keep in mind there. So in terms of that kind of covers it up there too a little bit. Now, in terms of the actual other side of things, like in terms of software support, this is another thing you're going to have to keep in mind. The Samsung Galaxy A50 is pretty, this is a pretty outdated phone already. And this is why I probably wouldn't recommend a single soul to go and purchase this phone anymore. It came out with Android 11, which is fine, or it came out with Android 9.0 and ended off with Android 11. Now, Android 11, not that bad, as you probably would have expected. It's perfectly fine. It's a good version of Android. But I mean, that's like 3 or 4 versions of Android old now. Why would you even go ahead and buy a phone like that at this caliber? When you can buy a phone that's still supported, that's still good, like a Samsung Galaxy A15 or Samsung Galaxy A54 or something like that. It just doesn't make any sense at all to go and buy a phone like this. Once again, you are much better off purchasing a device that is still kind of supported with software. And again, this one is not supported, so it just makes even less and less sense to go and buy something like this. So keep that in mind. Otherwise, though, I think this phone still has, again, the thought process behind this phone I think is a lot better than this phone is right now, if that makes any sense. On top of that, another big thing to keep in mind here is that with this particular device, the performance of it is also a little bit all over the place. So this phone came out with the Exynos 9610 chipset, and you can either get 4 or 6 gigabytes of RAM on this thing. Now, from the performance side, once again, it's a pretty lackluster performing device. So you are getting a lackluster performance, and you're getting lackluster software right now too. So it's just one of those things where, like, if you're going through and buying this type of phone, like, why would you go and buy this phone? Like, it just doesn't make a lot of sense at all, in my opinion. And that's why you are much better off purchasing a device, like I said before, that is still supported with software. And this thing, not only is it not supported with software, but the performance really isn't that great either. And once again, that's kind of what's going on here. With the Samsung Galaxy A50, you have to remember a few things. One, this phone, from a performance side, could be giving you a much better experience. I mean, for like smaller applications, it's going to be like, okay. But for those bigger apps, that's when you're going to run into some problems. So I will tell you, like, if you're going through and trying to get some, applications and everything that are, above and beyond, it's really not going to be that great. And that's kind of going to be the problem that we're going to run into as well. So this in and of itself, it's not that great of a performing device. And that is kind of the problem that you're going to be running into once again, when you're getting this type of phone. So once again, kind of keep that in mind as well. And to be honest, I will tell you once again, this phone, like the thought process behind this phone is better than this phone itself. Like, I would not recommend any single person to go ahead and buy this phone anymore. It doesn't make any sense. You are much better off purchasing a device that is still supported with software. And this thing, like I said before, not only is it not supported with software, it's just the performance isn't even that great. Even if this thing was supported with software, it really wouldn't be that great of an experience. So I say that to say the Samsung Galaxy A50, good phone, when it first came out, but it really isn't worth buying anymore. And you are much better off, again, purchasing devices that are, 1, supported with software, and 2, are better than that are the first generation of its kind. And now that we have the A51, A52, A53, A54, and now the A55, you might as well go for the A53 or above at this point. So in terms of that kind of covers it up there. If you have any other thoughts or questions, let me know in the comment section below. Hit the like button, that will mean so much, but definitely hit that subscribe button. More importantly than everything else, I love every single one of you guys. Hopefully I'll catch you guys in the next video. Peace out till then.